Hello everybody, my name is Roy Cohen. I'll be hosting this week's Community Forum show, a show I'm sure you're going to find very interesting. It's also very current in nature in that we're going to be talking about the hands-free debate that's been going on in the Boston State House and the impasse and the reasons for it, and hopefully we'll be able to figure out what we can send in as a note to get them to finally get the thing passed. With me is the two people that are very heavily involved. On my left is Jerry Cibley. He's a grieving father and an advocate for the safe driving program. And next to Jerry is my favorite guest, Mary Maguire. She's the AAA Director of Public and Legislative Affairs, and we welcome you all to the show.
And you're my favorite host.
Oh, thank you. I knew there was a reason why you keep coming back.
And Mary, you're my favorite host.
Okay, now that we're beyond that.
This is great.
Why don't we start off with a little bit of history? There's a reason why these two are here and how they met, and it's kind of a sad story, but it was quite a coincidence. And let me turn it over to Jerry to get the story started.
Thanks, Roy.
You're welcome.
May 13th, 2007, my 18-year-old son Jordan was driving his car in the town of Norton. We were on the phone back and forth, and at the time Norton didn't have really good cell service. So as a consequence, we kept getting disconnected. It must have happened, I don't know, maybe even as much as a half a dozen times, when all of a sudden I heard something that sounded like an ooh or an ah. To this day, I really don't know exactly what it was or what it is, but tried my son back continuously on the phone, kept trying and trying. I made the assumption, he's 18 years old, he probably didn't charge his phone, and he left his vehicle adapter at home. We could not get him. And about 30 minutes later, there was a continuous ringing of our doorbell, followed by pounding of the door. My wife ran down the stairs, and it was a police officer. I came flying down the stairs, and the way our stairway is, I'm able to see over the top, and I was able to see that it was a uniformed police officer, Officer David Fiscaldo, who's now a sergeant in Foxborough. David immediately asked, are you the owner of? And I said, yes. Is my son okay? He said, sir, all I can tell you is there's been a terrible accident and you have to get to the hospital as quickly as possible. And my question was, which hospital? I'm used to going to the Norwood Hospital. I did not know exactly where he was, and it turned out that he was at Stoughton. So thanks to the kindness of the Foxborough Police Department, and I am always going to be grateful and indebted to their complete kindness, they dispatched Sergeant Fiscaldo and allowed him to personally drive me there with the sirens. I made numerous phone calls from the cruiser to try and find out a status of my son. The only status that I could get was that he had sustained a major head trauma. And I remember thinking in the car that if he's going to be the victim of traumatic brain injury and not have a quality of life, then I'm going to hope he didn't make it. A few minutes later, we arrived at the hospital. We went right through. I remember we didn't even stop at the front desk of the emergency room, and we were ushered in. A nurse came out. I told them that I was Jordan's father. Is my boy okay? She said, we need to wait for the doctor. And I said, please, it's a very simple question. Is my boy okay? A few minutes later, the emergency room physician came out. She said, can we go somewhere to talk? And I said, no. Just give me an answer. Is my son okay? And she looked at me and she said, I'm sorry. Your son died. Mm. And I've described it before, and I'm literally, chills just went up and down my body again. But I let out this blood-curdling scream. It came from so deep in my body that I know when you watch television and someone breaks the news to somebody of a death and they let out this scream, They do a fairly good job, but let me tell you this, the real thing is just so much more explosive. It just comes from your gut. And my son was gone.
Unbelievable.
He was 18 years old. He was 3 weeks shy of graduation. He had gone the night before to the prom. And what's ironic, and I'm not sure you remember, Roy, but he hired a limo. You were supposed to be the driver.
Mm.
And at last minute, you had some sort of a conflict, so they sent somebody else in a really nice, I think it was an Explorer, if I remember, black. And he had the time of his life with his then girlfriend. And he was actually going to Norton because that's where his girlfriend, Larissa, was living, and he was going there to deliver pictures from the prom. He did deliver the pictures, and he lost his life at 30 miles an hour, hit a big, massive oak tree, and as I said, he was killed instantly.
Where was the oak tree? This is...
Well, this is really ironic. This wonderful lady sitting to my left, who I did not meet until about 2 years after Jordan's death, turned out that the tree that my son hit was in her front yard.
Wow.
And Mary and I met at a follow-up to an Oprah Winfrey program where I'd been one of the featured guests on what was known as her No Phone Zone program.
Mm-hmm.
And in Boston, they had some sort of a rally, and Mary was there representing AAA, and she came over to me, and we talked for a few minutes, and she let me into this story. So Mary and I have an amazing connection.
Yeah, so I remember the day well, actually, because it was Mother's Day of 2007, and I had actually been at a memorial service in New Hampshire with my husband and our 3 children, who were quite young at the time, and we arrived back at our house in Norton, not far from where Jordan had been visiting Larissa, down at the estates of Norton, and we pulled into the driveway, and there was police tape around the fence and the oak tree. And I didn't want my kids to see anything because they were little, and the car was still right there at the tree that Jordan had hit. So I remember trying to keep my kids away from the car and that type of thing because I didn't want them to be traumatized. But at any rate, you know, we learned later that day that that a young man had passed away because we got a phone call from, I think, a friend of yours and a friend of Jordan's who told us what had happened because we weren't sure at that point what had happened. And they asked me if they could do a memorial at the tree that Jordan had struck with the car. And then in the ensuing days, of course, we said yes. And there was a beautiful memorial set up at the tree with all kinds of flowers and prayer cards that stayed there for quite some time, for a couple of months. And in the ensuing days, actually, we had a number of news reporters in the yard from Boston TV stations because they were reporting on the story, and they were especially interested in Jerry's story because you had owned or had a connection to a cell phone business.
I owned 8 cell phone stores at the time, Mary, and I've said it since 2007, and I think when I started I said it was 2013, I'm not sure, but all of a sudden it was 2007. It's been 13 years that I've been at this.
Yeah.
But
and you spoke out right away on the issue of being distracted by cell phone use, and then we ended up meeting 6 months later. I went to AAA and started working in traffic safety, and then a couple of months after that, probably closer to a year, I met Jerry at the event that he was talking about in person, and we explored that connection that we had. And of course, I told him how sorry I was, and you know, my kids were upset. Our whole family was upset, and then to get to know him and work with him as an advocate has been really rewarding.
Can I assume that would be the beginning of the distracted driving effort to
Actually not.
It was before that?
It was before that. Senator Mark Montigny had proposed bills 2 years prior to 2007.
Right.
And the night before my son's funeral, and unfortunately because He was so seriously injured in the crash that his body went to the medical examiner, and they unfortunately kept him for 3 extra days longer than they normally would. But the night before he was buried, I spent, I believe it was 2 hours on WBZ radio, Jordan Rich, who became the very first advocate to start to assist me. And then as we did more and more public speaking and Senate hearings and testifying on the Hill, got to know Mary pretty well, so much so that I can call on the phone and say, "Hey Mary, it's Jerry," and she would know who I am.
And we testified on all those bills as well. And Jerry's absolutely right. Mark Montigny, Senator Montigny, has been a proponent of hands-free for many, many years. And so have Leader Joseph Wagner in the House and Transportation Chair Bill Strauss in the House. They also have been longtime proponents of hands-free, along with a number of other legislators.
I invited Senator Mark Montigny to come and be part of this discussion, but he's tied up in the State House. But he did send a statement, which you'll indulge me, I'll read it off. For years, Montigny has worked with families of distracted driving victims to prohibit the use of handheld devices while driving. He filed the first bill in 2004, as you mentioned, and successfully championed the bill through the Senate in 2016 and 2017, each time seeing the bill stall in the House, and I can't understand that. Finally, this session, both branches took up the bill, this is recently, and passed their own versions, leading to the impasse that currently exists, and maybe we can get into that. His legislation has included strong measures sought by the families, including insurance surcharges for repeat offenders and ensuring any use of a phone is limited to a single tap or swipe. And there's, I guess there's reasons for that. In case of an emergency, you should at least be able to do that. And then there's a quote, "I call upon the Senate and House leadership to come to an agreement immediately on the distracted driving legislation. I demand this not because I think it is easy or that there is a simple answer, but because I believe that it's too important and we are too close to let this opportunity slip through our fingers. As we all know, either through personal experiences or through the stories of the families who have lost loved ones and become passionate advocates to save others from experiencing the same grief, the cost of continuing to allow drivers to drive distracted is too great to ignore. It has been 5,754 days since I first filed this legislation," and then he ends it by saying, "It's time that we settle this matter." I agree.
Senator Montigny has been an incredible supporter. Joe Wagner has been an amazing supporter, and Strauss has been involved in this, as you said, since almost day one. And it's just such a shame, and I need people out there to understand that for the first time, not only did we get this through the Senate with 100% of the vote, but we got this through the House on May 6th with only 2 dissenting votes, and those 2 dissensions I do not believe are directed towards not passing the hands-free bill, but there's some other language in the bill which is what has been causing this not to get to the governor's office. At this point in time, the hands-free bill sits languishing in committee.
Right.
It requires 2 more signatures from the Senate, which we just cannot get. Last Thursday, we held a press conference. We had Emily Stein of Safe Roads Alliance. We had the Levitans, who have an organization called Text Less, Live More, myself, and we had a victim of distracted driving who spent considerable time in a hospital and by all rights shouldn't be alive, but she's doing amazingly well.
And Emily Stein lost her father
Emily
to a
lost her
distracted driving
father.
crash, and the Levitans lost a
their
daughter.
Mary.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I have just some quick facts that maybe you'll agree with, and if they need to be updated, let me know. But I have that in May 15th of this year, 2019, Massachusetts House votes to ban handheld cell phone use while driving.
Yes, correct.
Okay, that's the House.
June 6th.
No, that was
No, that was May, and then
that was May, and then
is
June
the Senate.
6th, the Massachusetts Senate passed a bill moving state one step closer to banning handheld cell phone use while driving. What do they need? They need a majority, or they need everybody?
Well, what happens in Massachusetts is that, as you said a couple of minutes ago, they passed two different versions. So in Massachusetts, when there are two different versions of a bill, if they're not identical, they go to what's called a conference committee. And so the conference committee negotiations are secret by law, but the conference committee has been working on this bill, and that's the committee that Jerry referred to that the bill is still sitting in. So the conferees still need to come up with a compromise between the House and Senate versions.
Okay, my question is, why does it have to be so complicated? Why can't they both agree that there's a bottom line to this? Ban the use of cell phones. And if there's other stuff that needs to be agreed upon, why can't they take care of that later on, or through an amendment or executive order or something like that?
You make a great deal of sense, but I have been told conclusively by members of the Senate and members of the House that they will not strip out and let stand on its own hands-free legislation.
Why?
Because of the fact that whenever there's a traffic safety bill, there is almost always a concern, justifiably so in many cases, about racial profiling and its connection to police stops.
That's ridiculous.
Well,
I mean, I read that. It's not racial profiling. I mean, the police are going to seek out a certain class of person to write them up.
But what they did, Roy, is they added this entire piece about reporting. And this is what's holding it up. From my understanding, and again, we're not privy to the terms of the conference committee, but it appears that the Senate wants it one way in terms of reporting, the House wants it another way. I met with the Senate President, Karen Spilka, about 2 weeks ago. She assured us this is top priority, top priority, top priority. And I can't think of any type of top priority that has been given less movement to the front than this top priority. We've asked, and Speaker DeLeo suggested that we strip out and just merely pass a hands-free bill, which is what all of the advocates and all of the lobbyists, and I'm sure, Mary, you would agree that if they just had a hands-free bill, they could then, at a later date, put the reporting mandates in and figure that out. But right now,
This is what I'm suggesting.
I know.
I think we feel that both pieces are important, certainly. I mean, the racial profiling data collection piece is important, and the hands-free piece is important.
But
They're
not to
both
this bill,
important.
Mary. It's been too long. We're going to lose somebody else. And I would hate to be one of the legislators who gets word from an aide or sees on TV that there was yet another distracted driving crash because someone was talking on a cell phone and they were more worried about specific language. We need to pass this. We need to pass it now. It'll take, I've been told, 10 or 15 minutes to strip out that language and put a bill that both the House and the Senate can agree on and get it to the governor's desk, who has indicated he will sign it the moment it hits his desk. And we've been waiting. This has been since June.
So what do we do? What can be done now to push them in the right direction?
I spoke briefly to Senate President Spilka earlier this week, and she said she had sent a couple of proposals over to Chairman Strauss in the House. So hopefully the dialogue continues. That's certainly what we need. We need the conversation to continue. And I think it's important to have a more general conversation about distracted driving. Advocates like Jerry and Emily and the Levitans, have certainly been so committed and dedicated in their fight to get this bill passed, and I have such incredible high regard for all of you. But I think we need to send a message to drivers out there that there are many distractions in the car. It's not just the smartphone. It can be putting your makeup on, eating a hamburger, tweaking your infotainment in the car or your in-car technology, which AAA research has determined is extremely distracting. So the numbers are that in 2016, 3,450 people lost their lives across the country in crashes where distracted driving was a factor. In Massachusetts, 45 people in 2016 we lost. So we can't lose sight of the numbers that Jerry referred to. But we also need to remember that when we get into our cars, we're all so busy and so wired today. And we have so many abilities through technology to stay wired constantly to our offices and our families and our friends and to social media. A huge proportion of the time that people spend using cell phones, smartphones in their car, people are in apps 86% of the time, like Facebook, et cetera. So the point being, when you get into your car, your first responsibility is to drive safely. So your first responsibility when you get into your car is to your own safety, the safety of your passengers, and the safety of everyone else on the roadway. Your first responsibility is not to remain wired to your office through your cell phone, or wired to your family, or wired to your friends. One of the things that we know from our AAA research that I think it's really important to point out as part of the hands-free debate is that hands-free is not risk-free. So as long as you're having a conversation, the cognitive distraction of that conversation, and you alluded to that in terms of your conversation with Jordan that you were having at the time, the cognitive distraction of the conversation pulls your brain away from your driving, and that's where your brain belongs, because driving is challenging. You drive in Boston all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And driving in this part of the country with the volume of traffic we have and the number of pedestrians and cyclists is extremely distracting. So you got to put the smartphone away, you got to stash it in the trunk. Even if the hands-free bill passes, and we certainly hope it does, and we've worked for many years at AAA to get this bill passed, and we continue to work. I testified this year. We continue to talk about it in the media. But we know that, again, hands-free is not risk-free. You've got to limit your smartphone use in the car. If you're having a conversation, even if you're hands-free, your mind is going to be on that conversation.
I'm going to respectfully disagree with you, Mary, because I've been a salesman on the road. I've been a road warrior all of my life. And prior to 1986, which is when I got my first car phone, as we called them back then, what I used to do is I would get on the road, I would see a couple of appointments, and then I would stop at a hotel, be it a Sheraton or a Holiday Inn, and there I would go to a bank of something called phone booths, or phones, pay phones, where I would dial my numbers, 4, 5, 6 of them, and I would say, enter my credit card number, 606-179-5144-3066.
I hope the credit card's not still
I
active.
think it's long gone, Mary.
Everybody at home's writing that down.
They're writing it down. I don't even think they have credit cards anymore for telephone calls, but it was about 90 cents for the first minute. And I would spend 90 minutes plus a day on standing by a payphone. Well, when cell phones came out, all of a sudden we got back that time. So in an essence, we were multitasking. And instead of pulling over on the road, you were picking up your hands-free phone, you were calling your clients, your customers, your meetings, and you gained back a couple of hours a day. Today, nobody's willing to give up that time. And yes, Mary, your statistics are absolutely correct. And there are people that would say when you are with a passenger in your car, you're just as distracted, and I'm sure cognitively you probably are, but the benefit of having a passenger is that they can do like my wife does almost every 5 minutes. Look out.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Look out,
why it's
watch
not
out.
as dangerous when you have
And-
somebody in the front seat,
and I'll
even
agree
though
with
that can
that.
be a distraction too.
But the idea of putting it in the trunk or turning it off, I don't think appeals to many people. And as much as I'd like to pledge to do that, and I'll put you on the spot, Mary, do you make any hands-free calls in the car?
Oh, absolutely. But it's
Okay.
also not against the law to do so.
I'm not suggesting it is.
I try to limit my phone use in general in the car because I know that everybody has had the experience of talking on the phone and driving by the exit to their home that they've gotten off on every day, every night for 365 days.
I do that when I'm not on a phone, Mary.
Exactly. Well, and that's true. I mean, it
I
is
have no
certainly,
sense of direction.
Yeah, it's certainly possible to get lost in thought. But anyway, I will say I try to limit my phone use.
I think the word has to get out. I think that instead of the signboards over the last few weeks, they're talking about EEE. That's a bad subject. You got 4 or 5 people throughout the world or whatever that are getting sick from encephalitis or dying from it. And I feel very bad about that. But I think it's time to at least change the signboards and talk more about distracted driving, however they're going to do it.
Commonwealth of Mass has been very good with those signboards, though. They really have.
Yeah, but talking about mosquitoes?
Well,
They
right
should
now,
be talking about something more important. That's my opinion.
Well, they've had drive more, text less,
absolutely.
message boards up
And we've
there.
done,
They
and I
have.
think
They're
they've
Yeah.
done well with it, and I appreciate it, and I also appreciate the concern regarding the public health of the Triple E.
Sure, but what's more important?
I think they're both important.
What's
they
more
are both
important?
important.
To
Everything's
me,
important.
I think it would depend upon the circumstance. If I had a child who got bitten by a mosquito,
It would be important to
It
you.
would be important
I
to me. So
understand
there are
that.
plenty of people out there.
Just
But-
some of the facts that people should be aware of who are watching the show. I did a little research for the show. Here we got Senator Joseph Boncour. He's from Winthrop. He made a statement that driving at 55 miles an hour is equivalent to making that trip across the length of a football field while blindfolded.
If
He
you're
says-
texting.
Yeah, if you're texting.
Yeah.
And state senators took one step closer to getting rid of that blindfold on Thursday when they unanimously passed a bill, which isn't going to go anywhere, banning handheld cell phone while driving. Distracted driving has become an epidemic on our roadways, and I think it's more than, you and I will disagree, but I think it's more than the mosquitoes that we're talking about. Something's got to be done to convince these people. Stoughton had a battle years ago when the MWRA was going to come in with this sewer treatment
yeah,
plant.
I remember.
And we fought them. And as a result of the fight, they moved it someplace else.
We've been fighting, Roy. We have a real
Yeah, but-
good core group. I also need to mention a gentleman by the name of Tom Bramley, whose daughter was critically injured, and unfortunately, after a year at the Spalding rehab, she passed away from her injuries sustained she was hit, I believe, in a crosswalk in Norwood. Is that correct,
That's right.
Mary?
Yep.
And he's very, very passionate, and we have so many other people that are behind us and supporters of ours. I spent a half hour last week with Senator Montigny and Senator Paul Feeney. All of these wonderful people are so into getting this done, but we can't move it. So what do? We put
Compromise.
There is a compromise. The compromise is to strip out every other portion but hands-free. There's
Okay.
nobody that doesn't want it, but they won't strip it out.
Well,
Why?
hopefully they'll come, the impasse is over the data collection and the dissemination of information gathered during that data collection, and so hopefully they'll be able to resolve that impasse. I'm interested in the quote from Chairman Boncour because he's talking about the fact that the average text is maybe 4.6 seconds, and that in that time that you're texting and you're going 60 miles an hour or 55 miles an hour, as the chairman said, you're covering the length of a football field looking down.
Yes.
So we passed the all-important, critically important texting ban in Massachusetts in 2010, and I was very much involved in that, as was Jeff Larson, the Director of Highway Safety in Massachusetts now, and a number of other advocates, Jerry as well. But at any rate, one of the problems with that that law, with the texting law, is that it remains legal in Massachusetts for individuals to dial a phone number. And if you're dialing a 10-digit number, I think you'd probably agree with me, that's the equivalent of texting. It's just as distracting. However, it remains illegal to text, but legal to dial a phone number. And so that was a big loophole in the
Dial
law.
a phone number with what, the cell phone?
Yes.
Exactly. So you can punch in, I can punch in your number, and it's legal to do that.
Something's wrong there.
Well,
You could
and so
absolutely I'm sorry.
what happened is that it became very difficult for police officers who saw someone punching in a number. They didn't know if they were texting, if that person was texting or dialing a number. And so when the police officer pulls you over, you know, most individuals say, I was dialing a telephone number.
Show me your phone.
Can't do that
Without a warrant?
without a warrant,
Oh, God.
and they're not looking to get warrants. It's too much time. There's too much court time.
It's-
There's too much
it's-
involvement. They won't do it.
It's pretty obvious that the governor, our Republican governor, is very much behind his comment. It's pretty clear that distracted driving and some tragedies and some near misses on construction sites are indicators that it's probably time to simply stop debating some of these common sense initiatives and just get them done, Baker said.
And you know what, we are so appreciative of the governor's support and of the governor's own road safety bill, which he's put forth, which has provisions for hands-free cell phones, for primary seatbelt bill, ignition interlock devices for all offenders in Massachusetts. There are many good elements. His bill is very comprehensive. And the fact that he has said he will sign a hands-free bill once it arrives at his desk, knock on wood, you know, has certainly helped move the needle on the issue, the fact that he's been outspoken. But one of the reasons why AAA believes that passing a hands-free bill is so important is that it gets rid of that loophole in the law, in the texting law. So in other words, if you take the phones out of people's hands, if people are compelled by law to talk hands-free, police will not have that confusion of, is that driver dialing a phone number legally or is that driver texting illegally? So that confusion for law enforcement will be eliminated, and hopefully as a result, we'll see the law better enforced.
I wonder how that slipped through, that you can dial with your phone but you can't text.
We tried to do a hands-free bill, and we compromised at a texting bill, which we had high hopes for, but as Mary explained and I've explained, it's too hard, it's too difficult to enforce, and we are the only state in New England that doesn't have it. New York has had it, New Jersey has had it long before Jordan's death. I mean, they were on the forefront. We now have, with the addition of Maine 2 weeks ago, 21 states and the District of Columbia. Am I right, Mary? Or is 20 the number with Maine?
I have 19 states.
No, then it's 20 because Maine just went.
Okay.
And the District of Columbia.
Can you dial a telephone number in Connecticut?
No.
You can't
Can you
hold a phone
dial
in
a
Connecticut.
telephone number in New Hampshire?
No.
Rhode Island?
No.
Vermont?
No.
Is there any state where you can dial a telephone number?
Massachusetts.
In New England.
Florida.
That doesn't make sense.
Well, we know it doesn't make sense. That's why I keep saying, and I keep being quoted in the newspapers, I say it's a no-brainer. I mean,
You know,
how much intelligence do you really have to figure out that if people aren't holding phones and aren't distracted with them? Now, it's not all about the phones, as we've said. People put makeup on, it's distracting. They read novels or books while they're driving. I've seen people putting on makeup. Last week, as I was driving into the State House, the woman behind me, she's doing her eyelashes and she's putting on her mascara and she put on her lipstick, and I was looking through my rearview mirror, and I was stopped at the time, but it was just amazing.
I saw someone playing the trumpet while driving on 495 North a few years
Now
ago.
that I
which was
like.
I should learn to play the guitar while I'm driving.
Well, you do play guitar. You play very well. But
Thank you.
And maybe you could have Marjorie Clapperwood in the back singing with you.
Again?
Again and
Let
again.
me ask you this. There was recently a real terrible tragedy up in New Hampshire where this truck driver wiped out 7 motorcyclists.
Yes.
Did I hear that he was distracted?
I have not heard that.
I think I heard
It's
that
been
he was.
reported that he was reaching for an iPad.
That's
at
a
the time.
distraction.
Well, that's a federal law violation because truckers are not supposed to. They do have hands-free requirements, and you can lose your CDL for that. Am I correct on that, Mary?
Yeah, I think, the overarching point that we need to make is, again, there are all sorts of things that we can do in our cars, but the primary purpose of getting into the car is to focus on your driving and get safely from point A to point B. And whether it's putting on mascara, playing the trumpet, talking to the kids in the back seat, talking to friends on the phone, the primary focus, which I think we've lost our focus on in our society today because we are so busy and so wired. Our primary focus is to stay focused on the road and to drive safely.
I
and to
drive
get
for a
home
living,
safely.
as you are both aware, and I get phone calls, but I press the delete or I press the end. I don't answer the calls. I just won't do it until I pull over someplace, and then I respond to whoever it is that's either
Right.
texting me. It's an awful effort to sit there and try to text or read a text while you're driving down the highway.
Well-
And I've even seen people on Route 95 in Sharon, in the middle lane, doing 50 miles an hour in a 65-mile-an-hour road because they're texting or
Well-
they're reading their
Roy,
cell phone.
Yeah.
for your great behavior, I'm going to reach back a few years and, in memory of Larry Glick, I'm going to give you a round of applause because I know you and I were both Glicknicks
Absolutely.
and loved Larry.
I've got, again, and I've done some research, I'll give you a chance to collect some thoughts. There are safe driving principles that we should be aware of. One, do not drive if you've consumed alcohol or drugs within the past 12 hours or if you're tired. Check and adjust all mirrors prior to you taking the vehicle out of park. Turn down and preferably turn off the car stereo. Set your radio station before you depart to avoid having to take attention to from driving to adjust the radio.
Set your GPS before you leave the driveway.
Sure, all of that. And ask any passengers to limit conversation that can distract the driver. Turn off your cell phone to prevent it from distracting you with a call or a message. If you must use a cell phone during your travel, be sure to use a hands-free device where they are still permitted by law, and hopefully that'll get shorter and shorter, that list. It allows you to initiate, make, or terminate calls without removing your hands from the steering wheel. Here's another one. Do not eat while driving. Now, and I have a story about that, where a person was busted for eating a bagel while driving. Pull off the road to a safe distance, such as a rest area or restaurant, to enjoy your meal. And then finally, do not drive long distances without taking frequent breaks. If you become tired, stop to rest or take turns with another driver. Driving while eating is even a distraction, and you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, so, and I think it's great that you brought up drowsy driving, especially because
your
it's
story,
getting
Mary.
darker a lot earlier and we're about to change the clocks again. And what we know from research is that people often become more sleep deprived during those times, and with it getting darker earlier, it becomes harder to see pedestrians on your commute home from work or someone on a bike. But my son, who is now 28 years old, was in a terrible drowsy driving crash when he was 17 years old and a high school senior. He was coming home from a homecoming dance in Fitchburg, was never late for his curfew, had to be home as a junior operator by law in Massachusetts, has to be off the road by 12:30 a.m. And 12:30 a.m. came and went, and he did not arrive home, and nor did he pick up his cell phone to answer, and he always answered his cell phone when I called. And finally, about 2 o'clock in the morning, I started calling all the state police barracks down the line from Fitchburg to Foxborough, right down the line, to see if they had a report of a crash, and they didn't. But what happened was my son had fallen asleep at the wheel and woke up, and he was taking down the reflectors on the right-hand side of the road. He overcorrected the wheel sharply to the left, young driver, inexperienced, made that sharp cut of the wheel, and that sent his pickup truck hurtling across 495 south, just south of the Rentham outlets, and he actually really impacted into a cliff at the side of the road there, sort of a rock formation at the side of the road. He very likely would not have survived had he not been wearing his seatbelt. And I think that's the other critically important message that we need to send. It's the law in Massachusetts, you have to buckle up. We're trying to make the law primary. We're trying to get a stronger law at AAA in Massachusetts. But that's another show. But at any rate, because he was wearing his seatbelt, he was not ejected from the truck. Your chances of being ejected when you're not belted are 30 times greater.
Sure.
So he survived, but he was trapped so tightly in the wreckage of his pickup truck, it took 3 sets of the jaws of life to extract him.
Wow.
And he survived, and he heard the EMTs arrive. There's a guardian angel out there somewhere. Since we couldn't reach him on his phone, he was trapped so tightly he couldn't get his hand into his pocket to answer the phone. That's why he didn't pick up the phone. But at any rate, a passerby noticed the wreck of his pickup truck and called 911, and that person most likely saved him from even a graver injury than he sustained. So at any rate, we went out to the scene, and I rode in the rescue with him to Rhode Island Hospital, to the trauma center, and he sustained a paralyzing arm injury, but he's 100% recovered. It helps when you're 17, much easier to recover from an injury. But again, I urge everybody to not only buckle up and wear your seatbelt, but to remember that drowsy driving, just as distracted driving is a killer, so is drowsy driving. And many of us don't realize how tired, in particular, teenagers are. They're the most sleep-deprived segment of our population. And so talk with your teenage driver or your young driver or your husband or your wife, whoever it is, about the dangers of driving drowsy, because it only takes a second for sleep to creep up on you.
It's amazing. I often think about how quickly one falls asleep. 1 minute I'm watching Judge Judy, and the next second I'm out like a light. And it was my intention to watch the entire show.
Yeah.
And I know that happens when you're driving. It can be that quickly, the body gets tired. Mary's story is just, it has such a happy ending. You'll also notice that we don't use the term accidents anymore. We started calling them crashes. And that has seemed to go throughout the news industry, that everyone refers to them as crashes.
And the reason for that is that 96, 97% of crashes are due to human error. So they're not all accidents. There are certainly true accidents that occur on the roadway, absolutely. But for the most part, again, there's some kind of human error, whether you're distracted, whether you're driving tired, whether you're driving drunk. There's usually some type of human error that's a factor.
The bottom line, as Mary has so well said, you don't want to be impaired or possibly impaired. And I need to also talk about the seatbelts a little bit, because when Jordan dropped his cell phone, even though he was going 30 miles an hour, he did remove his seatbelt. And when they told me that he was found without a seatbelt, I said, that's impossible. He was Mr. Seatbelt. He loved wearing a seatbelt. He wouldn't get in the car, and I think we've done a really good job of educating our young drivers. They wear seatbelts. Wouldn't you agree, Mary?
I think so, yeah. I think, certainly the usage could always be higher. I mean, we're still 46th in the nation in terms of seatbelt use in Massachusetts, unfortunately.
But again, as you said, it's not a primary infraction. And what that means is, if you're driving down the road and you see a policeman next, or a police officer next car over, you can show them that you're not wearing a seatbelt. And unless they stop you for speeding or a headlight problem or a tail light problem, they can't cite you for that. They're not allowed to make a stop just on the fact that you're not wearing a seatbelt. It's a secondary infraction.
Why would you wave your seatbelt at a police officer?
You probably shouldn't.
You definitely shouldn't.
But legally you could. And they would not have a right to stop you.
Unbelievable. What can we do? What kind of a movement can we start?
Well,
to get this thing passed?
Call the Senate President's office, Senator Spilka, and call Speaker DeLeo's office. If you are friends or have a relationship with anybody in the legislature, contact them. Tell them this bill needs to get passed, and it needs to be passed 2 months ago,
and
3 months ago, 5 years ago.
You can always contact your own state rep,
Absolutely.
your own senator, But make your voice heard if it's something that you feel strongly about.
I think
We can make a difference.
I think I will send them a copy of this show. Tell them to plug into it and see what the average citizen wants from them.
Well,
Do your job. Where have I heard that before? Do your job.
here's what's a little troubling, and I'm a former Stoughton resident.
We miss you.
Thank you, Roy, and I miss you too. I lived in Stoughton for almost 25 years. Jordan went through all grades except his senior year when he moved to Foxborough with his stepmom and I. I still own property in Stoughton. Stoughton's my home. I look at it that way, but recently when I posted on the Facebook page that is home to the Stoughton page, I was amazed at how much negativity I got on my posts. People saying, well, we don't need any more laws. Why do we need to legislate more? How stupid can people get? I don't have a problem talking on my cell phone. We already have laws that will protect people. Yes, there are laws against dangerous driving to endanger, but the police aren't willing to invoke those. You can be stopped practically for anything, probably even waving your seatbelt at a police officer if they can come up with a good reason. Not suggesting that, but just theoretically.
Hopefully you're always buckled up, Roy.
I always buckle.
I
want you to stay
I
safe.
buckle up through the car wash. I mean, it's a habit.
That's what
It's
we
a
like
habit,
to hear.
man. I am always buckled up. I believe in it. I always have. I have ever since they came out with them, and you had to buy them in the auto supply place and put them into the car and screw them into the bolt receptacle on the floor. This is way back in the
Roy,
60s.
in 1962, my mom got a brand new Chevrolet Impala, and we took a road trip as a family to Canada. And I remember we had to stop at a gas station in the West Roxbury area so that we could have these newfangled seat belts. And I can still hear my mother, God rest her soul, but saying, buckle up, everybody.
Yeah.
Good for your mom.
Yeah.
Mom knows best.
I remember in 1960 getting stopped by the Warwick police at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I had a seatbelt on and my convertible top down, and the cop asked me what that was, and I told him it was a seatbelt. That's way back at the beginning.
But no roll bar.
No roll on, no. Okay, we're going to take a short break here to take a breather and take a look at some of the public service announcements that we have, and then we'll get back here and we'll give you some information on how to get in touch with Mary and maybe discuss this further. We'll be right back. Hi, this is Roy Cohen. The crew would like to thank Maxie's Delicatessen, located at 117 Sharon Street in Stoughton. You can reach them by calling 781-341-1662. The American Cancer Society is looking for volunteers to drive cancer patients to and from treatments. You can volunteer by calling 1-800-ACS-6662 or online at www.cancer.org. Ilse Mark's Food Pantry and St. Anthony's Free Market is located at 2 Park Avenue in Stoughton. For more information, call Christine Gallagher at 781-341-0611 or 781-341-0549. To get involved with Meals on Wheels, call Jessica at 781-344-8882, extension 2. The Stoughton Penny Saver. Our business is advertising your business in Stoughton. To advertise, call 781-344-4833. Community Forum showtimes here in Stoughton. You can see it on Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays at 6 p.m., Monday at 8 p.m., Tuesday at 5 p.m., either on Comcast Channel 9 or Verizon Channel 28. If you have any comments or suggestions, contact us at communityforum1@yahoo.com. Samaritans, 41 West Street, 4th floor in Boston, Massachusetts, 02111, or call them at 617-536-2460. The 24-hour helplines, 877-870-HOPE or 877-870-4673. Samaritans, 800-252-TEEN or 800-252-8336, or online www.samaritans.hope.org. For you bingo players, I want to tell you about the Monday night bingo being held at the Ahava Torah Congregation, 1179 Central Street in Stoughton. The doors open at 4:30 p.m. The games start at 6:30 p.m. You come on down and win some money. They have two big prizes. One is $1,199 and the other one is up to $3,000. So
My
come
Malibu
on down.
that I
had all of those things in it. It was beautiful. Okay, we're back, and here's the information for Mary that I can't see. Mary, maybe you can read that for the audience.
Sure. So I'm the Director of Public and Legislative Affairs at AAA Northeast. Much easier just to call me Massachusetts spokesperson, because I'm the one from the club in Massachusetts who talks to the media on a regular basis. And we're located at 335 Providence Highway in Westwood, right across from Lambert's. I know we probably have a lot of Lambert's fans out there. Great sandwiches. And you can reach me at 781-461-0010. And you can also email me at mmaguire@AAAnortheast.com.
What a great job. You sound like a radio announcer or a TV
No,
reporter,
Roy,
like a TV reporter. Pardon me?
I didn't put up my contact information, but I can
Tell it like it is.
throw it out.
Go ahead.
I'm Jerry Cibley, that's with a C, C-I-B-L-E-Y, and you can reach me, if you'd like, at area code 508-698-3664. Once again, 508-698-3664. And you can email me. It's Jerry, Jerry, at Cibley.com, Cibley.com. And if you like my photography, if you go to my website, it's all my photography.
Excellent.
Cibley.com.
Okay, before we change horses, there are three things that I want you to remember as a driver. Taking your eyes off the road is a distracted way of driving. So keep your eyes on the road. Taking your hands off the steering wheel, I don't know why you'd do that, but that's also a way of distracted driving. And taking your attention off the work of driving, that's a distraction. So stop doing those and let's make the roads safer. Now, we have Mary, and Mary has another subject she'd like to touch before we end the show, talking about slow down and move over.
Right, yeah, so I'm actually going to talk about two campaigns that we have at AAA. And Slow Down, Move Over is the first one. So we all, during the summer, saw the workers at the side of the road who are working on construction zones. And we all see almost every day out on the road the red, yellow, and blue lights of emergency responders. And so imagine that you're an emergency responder and your office is the side of the road and people are whizzing by you at 65, 70 miles an hour and coming awfully close, often too close. In this country, every 6 days, an emergency responder is struck or has a close call in terms of someone driving by very quickly as that person is trying to do their important work of helping us at the side of the road. So that's why in 2009, AAA and many other stakeholders helped pass the Slow Down, Move Over law in Massachusetts, and that law is designed to protect emergency responders, police, tow truck drivers, utility drivers, anyone who's working at the side of the road where you see red, yellow, or blue lights. Well, what we're finding is that people aren't paying attention to that law. The law says that if you come upon an emergency situation at the side of the road or someone who's working at the side of the road, you must either try to move over to the next adjacent lane, and if it's not safe to do so, then you slow down. So the idea is Slow Down, Move Over. We're launching a campaign at AAA to protect tow truck drivers and emergency responders. We will have public service announcements in all of the states that are covered by our club territory, so in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. And I'd love to bring the PSA to your show and talk about it some more, but I'll definitely send it to you.
Okay.
We've just finished editing the PSAs. They came out really well. And our other campaign, and I don't know if I have time to talk about it yet. We've got 3 minutes. Our other campaign is a campaign that is aimed toward teenagers when it comes to marijuana and driving. So we now have recreational marijuana in Massachusetts, as you know. The message we want to send is that driving high is not safe. So if you feel different, you drive different. And we actually are working with the Highway Safety Division, the Cannabis Control Commission, and the Dispensary Association. We've created flyers talking about the fact that it's dangerous to mix marijuana and driving, and those flyers are being put into product bags at the dispensaries when they're making sales. So that's one of the things that we're doing. But we also have a great new program that we're bringing to the high schools, and we'd love to bring it to Stoughton High School or Canton High School or any of the high schools connected to any of your viewers. It's called Shifting Gears, the Blunt Truth About Marijuana and Driving. And we've already taught several thousand students in Rhode Island and a number here in Massachusetts. We'd like to expand the program here in Massachusetts, so we'd love it if you'd help us spread the word. But this is a whole curriculum that we've developed. It's been reviewed by Brown University School of Public Health, and the curriculum aims to teach young people, teenagers, who are at the age where they are about to start driving or where they are driving, that it's dangerous to drive high.
Excellent. I love what the AAA does, and I love what you do, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully Stoughton High School and other surrounding high schools, if you're watching the show, give me a call at that number and, or shoot me an email, and I'm happy to connect you with the program.
She answers very quickly, by the way.
I try.
All right, at this point, we're running out of time, and I just want to take a moment to thank those people who are helpful in putting the show on. It used to be just a one-person or two-person show. Now there's a whole list of names, and you just bear with me as I mention them. Michael Hammond, he's the boss man around here, and we appreciate his effort. Jeff Pickett, Dave Young, C.J. Mullen, Frank Walsh, who comes in and helps out with the camera work, Gina Coe, who comes in once in a while to push the buttons, Leo McGowan, we're hoping your recovery is going smoothly. And we have a new young lady, Laureen Kuhlbeck. She's going to be coming on board to start working in the control room. And we love having everybody involved. If you'd like to get involved, get in touch. We can always use more hands. It's a busy show, and we love having everybody involved. Meanwhile, Jerry Cibley, thank you very much for coming on.
Roy,
it was a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure.
I
know
hate
each other a long time.
I hate listening to your story. It's very sad, but you're a good messenger.
Needs to be told.
Mary, if I can reach over. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming again, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks with a new program. We thank you all for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.